On my sister's wedding day, no invitation arrived. When I asked why, she coldly said, "Your son is in a wheelchair, right? Having that on the aisle would be embarrassing." My mother sighed. "The bride is the star. It's only natural." I quietly said, "I see. Just don't regret it." And on the wedding day, my sister's calls wouldn't stop. A small two-story house in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. In the kitchen where the morning sun streams in, Caroline Walker was busily preparing breakfast. Known as Carrie to her friends, she had been teaching mathematics at the local high school for 12 years. On the kitchen wall hung a certificate of achievement from when she won a mathematics contest, displayed proudly. On her face, along with a gentle smile, one could see fine wrinkles etched by life's hardships. "Michael, breakfast is ready. You'll be late for school," Carrie called toward the stairs. After a moment, 16-year-old Michael appeared, skillfully maneuvering his wheelchair. Michael had been in a traffic accident 3 years ago and was paralyzed from the waist down. However, his bright smile and positive attitude remained unchanged from before the accident. "Good morning, Mom," Michael greeted her as he approached the table. His wheelchair was a new model, custom-made for basketball. "Don't you have an important test today? Are you ready?" Carrie asked as she placed pancakes in front of her son. "Absolutely," Michael answered confidently. "I studied late last night, and I also had an online study session with my teammates." Carrie gently stroked her son's head. She had divorced her husband David 5 years ago and had been raising Michael as a single mother ever since. The divorce had not been amicable, but she had moved forward with her life for her son's sake. As she finished breakfast and tidied up the kitchen, Carrie's cell phone rang. Looking at the screen, she saw it was from her sister Vanessa. "Good morning, Vanessa," Carrie answered the phone. "Carrie, it's terrible. The wedding planner says they can't provide the arrangement I asked for." Vanessa's voice was high with excitement and dissatisfaction. Carrie let out a small sigh. Her 35-year-old sister Vanessa had a personality opposite to Carrie's. Vanessa worked at a local real estate company while also being active as an Instagram influencer with tens of thousands of followers. Her flashy clothes and perfectly done makeup were her trademark. "Calm down, Vanessa. What's the problem?" Carrie asked calmly. "They're saying they can't prepare the combination of pink roses and white gold ribbons I requested because they're out of stock. I promised my Instagram followers I'd share my wedding vision board with them." Carrie said, "That's too bad," while inwardly feeling that her sister's concerns were trivial compared to her own daily problems. Vanessa was engaged to her longtime boyfriend Robert King and had a lavish wedding planned in 2 weeks. Robert was an executive at an IT company, and his family was known in the community as a prestigious family involved in many charitable activities. Carrie had the impression that Robert was a serious and considerate person, but she wondered somewhat why he had chosen the flashy Vanessa. "What did Aunt Vanessa say?" Michael asked after the call ended. "She seems to be having a hard time with her wedding preparations," Carrie answered. Michael said thoughtfully, "Do you think Uncle Robert will come to my team's game?" Robert was a sponsor for Michael's wheelchair basketball team and had attended their games several times. After his accident, Michael had discovered his talent in basketball, which he had started as part of his rehabilitation, and now he was a well-known local para-athlete. "I'm sure he will," Carrie answered. But a wave of anxiety crossed her mind. Since the engagement, Vanessa had gradually reduced contact with her and Michael. Carrie's mother Elizabeth had always favored Vanessa. Elizabeth habitually distinguished between her daughters as beautiful and successful Vanessa and stubborn and plain Carrie. Even when Michael had his accident, Elizabeth hadn't provided much support, saying it would look bad. On the other hand, Carrie's father Ted had passed away several years ago, but during his lifetime, he had deeply loved Carrie and Michael. He had been proud of Carrie's choice to become a math teacher and had always praised Michael's diligence. "Well, it's time to go to school," Carrie said, looking at the clock. "I hope you have a wonderful day." Michael skillfully maneuvered his wheelchair toward the entrance. Watching his back as he left, Carrie thought about her family. Though it might be a small family, the bond between her and Michael was strong, and that was her pride. One evening 2 weeks before the wedding, Carrie entered her house checking the mailbox. She had been looking for an elegant envelope among the bills and advertisements every day, but there was none today either. When she entered the kitchen, she saw Michael working on his homework. "Something strange," Carrie said as she placed the mail on the table. "Vanessa's wedding is in 2 weeks, but we still haven't received an official invitation." Michael looked up from his math problem and said, "Maybe the delivery is delayed." Carrie bit her lip. Still feeling something was off, she picked up her smartphone and tapped her sister's number. After several rings, Vanessa answered. "I'm a bit busy right now. Can I call you back later?" Vanessa's voice had a hint of impatience. "This will only take a moment," Carrie said. "The wedding is in 2 weeks, right? We still haven't received an invitation." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. Carrie could hear her sister taking a deep breath. "I didn't send you one," Vanessa answered coldly. Carrie couldn't believe her ears. What? What do you mean? Listen. It's nothing personal. It's just Vanessa continued, choosing her words carefully. Your son is in a wheelchair, right? It would be embarrassing to have a wheelchair in the aisle. It doesn't fit my perfect wedding. Carrie felt blood rush to her head. Are you talking about Michael? He's the star player on Robert's team, she said, trying desperately to control her voice. It pained her even more to think that Michael might be listening in the next room. But it looks bad in photos, Vanessa said in a casual tone as if discussing the weather. My social media followers expect perfection. You understand, don't you? Carrie was speechless. She felt a tightness in her chest. After a long silence, she managed to squeeze out the words, Vanessa, if you really think that way, we may need to reconsider our relationship. You're being dramatic, Vanessa retorted. As usual, you're turning everything into a tragedy. I just want my special day to be perfect. After hanging up, Carrie dialed her mother's number with trembling hands. Surely Elizabeth would bring her sister to her senses. She hoped that her sister's words were just a temporary bridal whim or a joke. Mom, I need you to listen to something, Carrie said on the phone. Vanessa said she's not inviting Michael and me to the wedding, because Michael is in a wheelchair. Elizabeth's response shattered Carrie's hopes. Carrie, the bride is the star. If that's what Vanessa wants, it's understandable, Elizabeth said calmly. You and Michael will just have to put up with it. How can you say that when Michael is your grandson? Carrie's voice trembled with anger and sadness. It's Vanessa's special day, Elizabeth replied. Aren't you just trying to get attention by bringing your son? Stop playing the victim as usual. Carrie quietly hung up the phone. Tears fell and streamed down her cheeks. She collapsed into a kitchen chair and covered her face with her hands, but she quickly straightened her back. She didn't have time to feel sorry for herself. She had to be strong for Michael's sake. She picked up her smartphone and sent a message to Vanessa, I understand. Michael and I won't come. And then she added, just don't regret it. A few minutes later, Vanessa replied, that helps me a lot. Thank you for understanding. Carrie scoffed. Understanding? Gratitude? Did her sister really not understand the weight of her words? When Michael entered the kitchen, Carrie quickly wiped away her tears. Mom, are you okay? Michael asked worriedly. Carrie smiled at her son. Yes, I'm fine, she lied. She knew how much the truth would hurt Michael. About Aunt Vanessa's wedding, it seems it's going to be a small family ceremony. We weren't invited. Oh, I see, Michael said, looking a little disappointed. But as long as Uncle Robert and Aunt Vanessa are happy, that's good. Carrie's heart ached at her son's innocent acceptance. He believed her explanation without question and didn't express his disappointment. This was her pride and her source of strength. That night, Carrie had trouble falling asleep. Her sister's and mother's words kept repeating in her head. A wheelchair is embarrassing? It looks bad? She never thought she would hear such words from her family. If her father were alive, he wouldn't have allowed this situation. From the next morning, Carrie pretended to go about her normal routine. She went to school, taught mathematics to her students, and watched Michael's practice after school. His wheelchair basketball skills had improved remarkably, and his teammates looked up to him. Watching Michael play, Carrie again felt angry at the fact that her sister was embarrassed by this wonderful boy. Then the wedding day arrived. Carrie and Michael spent it as usual. They had breakfast, watched a movie, and Michael played online games with friends. Around 3 p.m., when the wedding was about to start, Carrie's cell phone began to ring. It was Vanessa. Carrie decided to ignore it, but the calls wouldn't stop. They continued, 10 times, 20 times. Then her mother called as well. Carrie became anxious and finally answered. Carrie, something terrible is happening. Come to the venue. Her mother's voice was distraught. What happened? Carrie asked, pretending to be calm. Robert is saying he's going to cancel the wedding. He's furious after finding out you and Michael aren't here. Carrie was confused. What do you mean? As soon as Robert arrived at the venue, he started looking for you and Michael. He's angry, saying, why wasn't Michael invited? He's the pride of my team. If he finds out Vanessa said a wheelchair would look bad. Her mother's voice choked. Robert's parents are furious too. They're big supporters of parasports and huge fans of Michael. Carrie felt mixed emotions. She was hurt by her sister's callous attitude, but at the same time, she felt grateful that Robert and his family had stood up for Michael. But Mom, you said the bride is the star, Carrie pointed out sharply. You supported Vanessa's decision too. This is no time for that. Elizabeth's voice was urgent. Come quickly to save the ceremony. Vanessa is sobbing, and the guests are confused. Please, Carrie, we need your help. Carrie exhaled deeply. A few days ago, she and her son were unwanted at the wedding. And now, suddenly, they were needed to save the ceremony. She smiled bitterly at the irony of the situation. I need some time to think, Carrie said and hung up. Michael looked up from his game console and was staring at his mother. Is something wrong? Carrie sat down in front of her son and took both his hands. Michael, I need to tell you the truth, she said. About Aunt Vanessa's wedding, we weren't actually invited. Michael looked confused. But you said it was just a small family ceremony. That's not true, Carrie said quietly. Aunt Vanessa didn't invite us because you're in a wheelchair. She wanted to avoid having a wheelchair in her photos. A flicker of hurt appeared in Michael's eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. I see, he said quietly. I didn't want to hurt you. Carrie squeezed her son's hands tightly. But now there seems to be a problem at the venue. Robert is angry that we're not there. Michael thought for a moment, then suggested, let's go. Robert is a good person, and it would be for his sake. Carrie felt a lump in her throat at her son's mature response. Michael was considerate of others despite being hurt himself. Do you really want to go? Carrie confirmed. You don't have to force yourself. It's okay, Michael smiled. I forgive Aunt Vanessa. Besides, Robert always supports my games. I want to be there for his special day. Carrie and Michael quickly changed into formal attire. Carrie chose a navy blue dress, and Michael wore a dark gray suit. They got into the car and headed to the venue. 30 minutes later, they arrived at the lavish wedding venue at the Golden Palace Hotel. A red carpet extended from the hotel entrance, and a large floral arch decorated the doorway. However, there was tension in the air. In the lobby, formally dressed guests stood in small groups, whispering to each other with confused expressions. As Carrie and Michael entered the lobby, several guests noticed them and looked surprised. Mother Elizabeth hurried over. Her makeup was smeared with tears. Carrie, Michael, you came. Elizabeth's face showed relief as she tried to hug them, but Carrie stepped back. What's happening? Carrie asked calmly. Elizabeth lowered her voice and explained, Robert is furious. When he found out that Vanessa didn't invite Michael because she was embarrassed by his wheelchair, he said he would cancel the wedding. Michael frowned with concern. Is the wedding being canceled because of me? It's not your fault, Michael. Carrie placed a hand on her son's shoulder. This is the result of Vanessa's choices. While they were talking in the lobby, shouting could be heard from inside the ceremony hall. Show us inside, Carrie said to Elizabeth. The three of them passed through a wide hallway and entered a luxurious banquet hall. The room was decorated with white and pink roses, with a long aisle laid out in the center. Despite the wedding preparations, a fierce argument was taking place at the front. Robert was confronting Vanessa with a voice trembling with anger. His face was red, and the veins in his neck were prominent. Vanessa, in an extravagant wedding dress, was crying and making excuses. Robert's parents stood nearby, watching the scene with stern expressions. I can't marry someone who would exclude the family members they should cherish most, Robert's voice echoed through the banquet hall. Michael is the pride of my team. To exclude him because he's in a wheelchair. Robert's mother Martha was raising her voice. We've been involved in supporting people with disabilities for 20 years. We can't accept someone with such values as our son's wife. Vanessa was trying to defend herself through tears, but couldn't form words. I just wanted the ceremony to be perfect for Instagram. At that moment, the sound of Michael's wheelchair stopping at the entrance to the banquet hall changed the atmosphere completely. Everyone turned to see Carrie and Michael. After a moment of silence, Robert spotted Michael and immediately rushed over. Michael, you came, Robert said with an obviously moved expression. Michael greeted him with a calm smile. I'm glad you invited me, Robert. Robert looked confused. Invited? But Vanessa, Carrie said quietly, I hadn't told Michael the truth. I didn't want to hurt him. Robert understood and sighed deeply. He gave Vanessa a stern look. You haven't told Michael what you did. Carrie is much more considerate than you are. Vanessa bowed her head in shame. Her makeup was ruined by tears, and her luxurious wedding dress was wrinkled. Robert, Vanessa said in a small voice. I was wrong. Please forgive me. Forgiveness isn't easy, Robert said coldly. You completely misunderstood my values. Michael slowly moved his wheelchair forward, positioning himself between the two. Robert, I'm okay, he said quietly. Everyone makes mistakes. Michael? Robert seemed surprised by the boy's mature attitude. Robert's father Jonathan approached. Son, we need to decide whether to send the guests home or continue with the ceremony. The atmosphere was tense. All the guests' eyes were on Robert. He had a deeply thoughtful expression as he looked at Vanessa, then at Carrie and Michael. Before making his decision, Robert knelt in front of Michael. Michael, can you tell me what you want? You must be the most hurt, yet you're showing the most mature response. Michael sat in his wheelchair and looked at Robert with a serious expression. Then he quietly said, I just want everyone to be happy. If Aunt Vanessa is truly sorry, maybe you should give her another chance. Robert exhaled deeply and stood up. He looked at Vanessa and quietly asked, Can you become someone worthy of his generosity? Vanessa raised her tear-stained face and looked at Michael. Her eyes reflected shame and regret. Michael, I'm so sorry. Vanessa's voice was trembling. I was foolish. I only thought about my image and trampled on your feelings. Robert's mother Martha quietly approached Michael and knelt beside his wheelchair. She gently took his hand and smiled. Michael, I always look forward to your games. That reverse shot in last month's tournament was amazing, Martha said warmly. How wonderful it would have been if you had been the guest of honor today. Michael smiled shyly. Thank you, Aunt Martha. Vanessa turned pale and looked at Carrie with desperate eyes, seeking help. The sisterly bond had not completely broken even in this critical situation. Carrie took a deep breath and said wait a moment to Michael, then approached Robert. Robert, today is your and Vanessa's special day, Carrie said quietly. I don't want to ruin it because of Michael and me. Robert shook his head. Carrie, this isn't your or Michael's fault. It's about Vanessa's values. His voice was resolute, but there was hesitation in his eyes. Carrie continued quietly, but having this happen in front of everyone, it doesn't help anyone. Michael moved his wheelchair forward and positioned himself between the three. He said in a calm voice, I just wanted to celebrate Robert's wedding. I didn't mean to cause trouble for everyone. He glanced at Vanessa for a moment. I forgive you, and Vanessa. People make mistakes, and I think what's important is what we learn from them. Michael's calm demeanor and wise words eased the atmosphere slightly. Robert's father Jonathan stepped forward and placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. This young man seems to have more sense than us adults, Jonathan said respectfully. The guests were still standing around in confusion, but the tension was beginning to dissolve. Carrie felt proud of her son. He might be in a wheelchair, but his spirit was higher and stronger than anyone else's. Vanessa came forward crying and knelt before Michael. The hem of her wedding dress spread out across the floor. Michael, I'm sorry. I only thought about my image. She choked on her words. I didn't treat you as real family. If you can forgive me, I'll become a different person from now on. Michael smiled gently. It's okay, and Vanessa, I don't mind. He looked at her with sincere eyes. But I think Mom is the one who was really hurt. Vanessa's gaze turned to Carrie. A long silence flowed between the sisters. Carrie looked back at her sister with mixed feelings. Years of small conflicts, their mother's favoritism, and now the invitation issue. Still, they were sisters. Carrie, Vanessa said in a small voice, I'm sorry for hurting you. Excluding you and Michael was unforgivable. Carrie exhaled deeply. She was truly angry. She was hurt, but after seeing the tolerance Michael had shown, she couldn't continue to harbor hatred. But Robert still maintained a stern expression. I just want to marry someone who values family, he said quietly but firmly. Carrie looked at Vanessa and asked, Are you truly sorry? Vanessa nodded tearfully. I'm truly sorry. I was shallow. I didn't realize there are things more important than how I look on Instagram. Carrie turned back to Robert. Give her another chance. Everyone makes mistakes. What's important is whether we learn from them. Michael also said, I forgive her too, and looked up at Robert. The boy's brown eyes held wisdom beyond his years. Robert looked at his parents. Martha and Jonathan hesitated a bit, then said, We respect your decision. The room fell silent, and everyone waited for Robert's decision. He thought deeply and finally turned back to Vanessa. If you promise never to do something like this again, Robert said slowly, let's continue with the ceremony. A sigh of relief escaped from the audience. A few guests gave small applause, which gradually spread. A grateful smile spread across Vanessa's face. Thank you, Robert. I promise. She stood up and turned to Carrie. Carrie, can you arrange seats for you and Michael? Carrie smiled. Of course. Robert's venue coordinator hurried over. I'll prepare them right away, but we're running about 15 minutes late. Shall we ask the guests to take their seats? Robert nodded. Please do, and specially, he smiled at Michael. Michael, would you sit next to me? As my close friend. Michael's face lit up. Really? Of course, Robert said with a serious expression. You're a special guest. Carrie smiled quietly and placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. Come on, let's take our seats. Michael, you have a special seat next to Robert. Her mother Elizabeth timidly approached Carrie. Carrie, I too. Later, Mom, Carrie said quietly. She didn't want to cause any more problems right now. As the guests began to take their seats, Carrie pushed Michael's wheelchair toward the front. Vanessa returned to the dressing room to fix her makeup and prepare for the ceremony. Robert gently grasped Carrie's arm and whispered, Thank you. I don't know what would have happened today without you and Michael. Carrie smiled. Family can be difficult sometimes, but in the end, truth and compassion win. Music began to play quietly, and preparations for the ceremony resumed. Carrie sat in the front row with Michael and watched as her son proudly parked his wheelchair next to Robert. Despite the difficulties, the wedding proceeded as planned. But for Carrie, today's events were more than just a family conflict. It was a powerful lesson for everyone that true beauty lies within, more important than outward appearances. One Saturday a year later, Carrie's house was bustling from the morning. While checking the final preparations for the food in the kitchen, She glanced out the window. In the garden, she could see Michael playing basketball with his new college friends. He had just graduated from high school and started majoring in sports medicine at the state university. "Is there anything I can help with?" Turning at the voice, Vanessa had entered. She was wearing an apron and had already tied her hair back. Her once flashy fashion had toned down, and today she was dressed in clean, casual clothes. "Can you help with the table setting?" Carrie asked with a smile. "When are Robert and the others arriving?" "They're already in the parking lot. They're helping Mom and Dad out of the car," Vanessa answered as she spread the tablecloth. Since the wedding incident, family relationships had changed significantly. Vanessa had revamped her social media activity style and now helped with disability support work at Robert's family's charity. Her Instagram now focused on true beauty and inclusion, influencing many followers. The bell rang, and when Carrie went to the door, Robert was standing there with a wine bottle and a gift bag, smiling. Behind him were Martha and Jonathan, and Elizabeth. "Excuse me for dropping in," Robert said cheerfully. "Is everything ready for the anniversary party?" Carrie welcomed everyone into the house. Today was a family dinner to celebrate Robert and Vanessa's first wedding anniversary. Elizabeth approached Carrie and embraced her quietly. "Can I help in the kitchen?" "Thank you, Mom." Carrie smiled. Elizabeth was another person who had changed greatly. She now attended Michael's games without fail and had repaired her relationship with her grandson. Her relationship with Carrie had also gradually improved, and they now took time once a week to chat over tea. Michael and his friends came in from the garden. Michael had gained attention at the National Student Parasports Tournament and was highly regarded by the coaches at his university. "Uncle Robert," Michael approached, skillfully maneuvering his wheelchair. "Thanks for coming to the tournament last week." "Of course," Robert patted the boy's shoulder. "That three-point shot of yours was amazing." Everyone gathered in the living room, and Vanessa and Robert cut a small cake. As Robert raised his glass to propose a toast, Vanessa gently stopped his arm. "Actually, we have an announcement for everyone," Robert said with a beaming smile. "Vanessa is pregnant." Cheers erupted, and congratulatory words flew around. Martha had tears of joy in her eyes, and Jonathan proudly patted Robert's back. As the congratulatory voices settled down, Vanessa added, "And we're thinking of naming the child Michael." Michael was surprised and lost for words from emotion. Tears glistened in his eyes. "Really?" Michael asked in a voice choked with emotion. "Of course." Vanessa approached him and took his hand. "We want the child to grow up to be as compassionate, strong, and smart as you are." Carrie smiled quietly as she looked around at the family circle. Past conflicts had become things of the past, and now everyone was bound by strong ties of mutual support. That wedding crisis had become an important opportunity for growth for the family. Michael spoke of his future dream to become a para sports coach and support children in similar situations to his own. Robert was already planning to support his university program. As dinner began and the whole family enjoyed the meal with smiles, Carrie quietly thought, "That day when the phone wouldn't stop ringing was the new beginning for our family."